Ambassador Jackson straightened his tie and stepped forward into the massive chamber. His black suit was perfectly pressed, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, and his smile was warm and genuine. At least that's what he wanted the aliens to see. A friendly human. A harmless human. Someone they could trust. The Galactic Council chamber was unlike anything on Earth. It floated in space like a giant soap bubble made of metal that you could see through. Outside the transparent walls, a neutron star called Axis Prime spun slowly, its light painting rainbow patterns across the floor. Inside, dozens of alien species sat in a massive circle. Some looked like walking crystals. Others were clouds of gas held together by force fields. A few resembled giant insects or plants. Jackson had been preparing for this moment for 5 years. Humanity had been playing nice with the galaxy for 30 years now, ever since they'd invented faster-than-light travel and discovered they weren't alone in the universe. During those 3 decades, humans had been model citizens. They traded honestly, never cheated in business deals, and solved arguments with words instead of weapons. They smiled a lot. They bowed when appropriate. They learned alien customs and never, ever caused trouble. It had all been leading to this day. The human petition for full membership is now before the Council, announced High Arbiter Velshan. He was one of the crystal-looking aliens, and when he spoke, his whole body glowed with different colors. Light bent around him in strange ways, creating little rainbows that danced across the other council members. We have watched the humans carefully for 30 standard years. They have proven themselves to be adequate. Jackson kept smiling, but inside he felt a small sting. Adequate. After 30 years of perfect behavior, humanity was just adequate. But he understood. These aliens had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Some of them for millions. Humanity was the new kid on the block, barely out of diapers in galactic terms. However, continued Velshan, there are concerns we must address before granting full membership. Here it comes, Jackson thought. He'd known this was coming. A different alien stood up. This one was called Trill 9, and he belonged to a species called the Valurians. They looked sort of like upright millipedes covered in soft purple fur, with dozens of tiny legs and compound eyes that could see in directions humans couldn't even imagine. Trill 9's translator device made his voice sound worried. I must speak plainly about what troubles many of us, Trill 9 said, his many legs shifting nervously. The human biology is concerning. We have studied their anatomy extensively, and several features disturb us greatly. Jackson nodded politely, encouraging him to continue. He knew exactly where this was going. Their eyes, Trill 9 continued, pointing at Jackson with one of his forward appendages. They face forward. Both of them pointing the same direction. This is predator anatomy. On every world we have studied, species with forward-facing eyes are hunters. They need the depth perception to chase and kill prey. A murmur ran through the council chamber. Some aliens nodded in agreement. Others made strange sounds that their translators rendered as worried muttering. Furthermore, Trill 9 went on, warming to his subject, humans have what we call persistence physiology. Their bodies are designed for endurance. They can run for hours without stopping. They can go days without sleep when necessary. They can survive injuries that would kill most species in this chamber. This is not the biology of a peaceful species. This is the biology of a pursuit predator. More muttering. Jackson saw some of the smaller aliens actually moving their seats back slightly, as if putting distance between themselves and the human representative. And their digestive system, Trill 9 added. Omnivorous. They can eat both plants and meat. They have teeth designed for tearing flesh and grinding plants. Again, this is highly unusual for a species claiming to be peaceful and civilized. The chamber fell silent. All eyes and eye equivalents turned to Jackson. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. Jackson took a slow breath and stepped forward. His movements were careful, non-threatening. He spread his hands in a peaceful gesture that many species in the galaxy understood. Council members, I understand your concerns, he said, his voice calm and reasonable. Yes, humanity evolved with forward-facing eyes. Yes, our ancestors were hunters on our homeworld. We don't deny our evolutionary history. But that history is exactly that, history. Ancient history. He began walking slowly around the circle, making eye contact with different council members as he spoke. It was a technique he'd practiced for years, seeming open, vulnerable, honest. Thousands of years ago, my ancestors lived in caves and hunted animals with stone-tipped spears. But we evolved beyond that. We developed agriculture, civilization, art, music, philosophy. We learned that cooperation achieves more than conflict. We learned that peace is more profitable than war. The traits you mention, our forward-facing eyes, our endurance, our adaptable diet, these are just leftover features from our past. Vestigial traits like the appendix in our abdomen or the wisdom teeth in our jaw. Remnants of what we once were, not what we are now. He stopped walking and faced High Arbiter Velshan directly. We are no different from you now. We seek knowledge. We seek peace. We seek to learn from the ancient civilizations of this great council and to contribute what little we can to the galactic community. We have proven over 30 years that we can be trusted. We have never broken a treaty, never started a conflict, never given you reason to doubt us. The silence stretched out. Jackson could feel his heart beating faster, but he kept his expression calm and friendly. Everything depended on this moment. Finally, Velshan's crystalline body pulsed with light. The human makes valid points. We shall debate and vote. For the next 4 hours, Jackson stood patiently while the council argued. Some aliens supported humanity. Others remained suspicious. The Valurians, led by Trill 9, were the most vocal opponents. They kept bringing up humanity's predator features, and suggesting that accepting humans into the council would be dangerous. But slowly, gradually, the tide turned in humanity's favor. The fact that humans had been peaceful for 30 years counted for something. The fact that they were excellent traders and had shared some of their technology freely counted for more. And perhaps most importantly, humans were simply too useful to exclude. They were creative problem solvers, skilled engineers, and talented diplomats. Finally, Velshan called for a vote. Provisional membership is granted to humanity, he announced, and Jackson felt a wave of relief wash over him. However, there is one condition before full membership can be confirmed. Jackson's relief turned to caution. What condition, High Arbiter? Humanity must participate in a joint military exercise with Council forces. This exercise will demonstrate your ability to cooperate with our defense protocols and follow proper procedures in coordinated operations. It is a standard requirement for all new member species. A military exercise. Jackson hadn't expected that, but it made sense. The Council needed to know that humanity could work alongside their forces. It was reasonable. We would be honored to participate, Jackson said, bowing slightly in the formal gesture of respect he'd learned. When and where shall we send our vessel? The exercise will take place in 2 standard weeks at the Carix Nebula. Send 1 patrol vessel with a crew of no more than 200. The exercise should last no more than 6 hours. Details will be transmitted to your ship. Understood. Thank you, High Arbiter. Thank you, Council members. Humanity will not disappoint you. As Jackson left the chamber, he allowed himself a small, private smile. Humanity was in. Almost. Just one more test to pass. 2 weeks later, the human patrol ship called the Endeavour arrived at the designated coordinates in the Carix Nebula. Captain Laura Mitchell stood on the bridge, watching the swirling clouds of gas and dust outside her viewports. The nebula was beautiful in a deadly way, colorful, chaotic, and full of radiation that would kill an unprotected human in seconds. Mitchell was 42 years old, a veteran of Earth's Space Navy, and she'd been commanding the Endeavour for 3 years. She was tall and athletic, with short brown hair starting to show gray at the temples and eyes that missed very little. Her crew respected her because she was fair, smart, and never asked them to do anything she wouldn't do herself. The Endeavour wasn't impressive by Council standards. She was only 200 meters long, roughly cylindrical, with engines at the back and a rotating habitation section in the middle to provide artificial gravity. Compared to the massive Council ships gathering nearby, some of which were over 2 kilometers long, the Endeavour looked like a child's toy. But Mitchell was proud of her ship. The Endeavour was fast, maneuverable, and efficient. Her crew of 200 included some of Earth's best scientists, engineers, medical staff, and a small security detachment of 20 Marines. They weren't here to fight. This was a diplomatic exercise, but regulations required every ship to have basic security. Captain, we're receiving docking clearance from the Council flagship, reported Lieutenant James Peterson from the helm station. He was young, maybe 25, with quick reflexes and an easy smile. They're assigning us position 17 in the formation. Acknowledged. Take us in nice and easy. Let's show them how professionals operate. As the Endeavour maneuvered into position, Mitchell studied the other ships in the formation. 17 Council vessels floated in a loose sphere, their hulls gleaming with decorative engravings and ceremonial paint. They were beautiful ships, clearly designed as much for appearance as function. She noted their weapon placements, minimal and mostly defensive. These weren't warships. They were peacekeepers, patrol vessels meant for showing the flag and handling minor disputes. "Captain, we have a visitor request," announced the communications officer. "Council Observer Trill 9 requests permission to come aboard to monitor our participation in the exercise." Mitchell had been briefed about Trill 9, the Valurian who had questioned humanity's predator biology at the council session. Having him aboard wasn't ideal, but refusing would look suspicious. Permission granted. "Have someone meet him at airlock 3 and escort him to the observation deck." 20 minutes later, Trill 9 was settled in the observation deck, a small room with large windows and comfortable seating where VIP guests could watch operations without interfering with the crew. Mitchell went to greet him personally. "Observer Trill 9, welcome aboard the Endeavor. I'm Captain Mitchell." The Valurian's many legs rippled in what Mitchell's cultural briefings had told her was a gesture of polite acknowledgement. His compound eyes studied her with an intensity that was slightly unnerving. "Captain Mitchell, thank you for accommodating my presence. I am here merely to observe and report to the Council on humanity's performance during the exercise." "We're happy to have you. Please let my crew know if you need anything. The exercise should begin in about 30 minutes. Mitchell returned to the bridge, leaving Trill 9 in the observation deck with a good view of the bridge operations through the internal windows. She settled into her command chair and reviewed the exercise parameters on her data screen. It was supposed to be simple. The 17 Council ships would practice a defensive formation against simulated attackers, computer-generated threats that would appear on their sensors. They would coordinate their movements, demonstrate proper communication protocols, and show they could work together. Boring routine stuff. "All stations report status," Mitchell ordered. One by one her department heads checked in. Everything was green. The ship was ready. "Captain, we're receiving the exercise start signal," Peterson reported. "All ships moving to initial positions." The Council formation began to shift, ships gliding gracefully into a defensive sphere with the larger vessels on the outside and smaller craft like the Endeavor on the inside. It was a classic defensive posture, designed to protect the vulnerable ships in the center while presenting overlapping fields of fire to any attacker. Mitchell watched the tactical display, noting how smoothly the Council ships moved. They'd obviously done this many times before. The coordination was impressive. Then everything went to hell. "Captain!" shouted the sensor operator, a woman named Angela Baker. Her voice cracked with sudden stress. "Multiple contacts at the nebula's edge. They're not simulated, these are real ships. Reading Kresh power signatures." Mitchell felt ice form in her stomach. Kresh. That was impossible. The Kresh horde had been extinct for 2 centuries, wiped out in a war with the Council that had ended before humanity even left Earth's solar system. "Confirmed that reading," Mitchell snapped. "Confirmed, Captain. 37 vessels, Kresh configuration, weapons hot, and oh god, they're firing." The first volley of Kresh plasma weapons lit up the nebula like a fireworks display. 3 Council ships simply vanished, torn apart by weapons fire before their shields could even activate. Then 4 more exploded in rapid succession, their debris tumbling through space. Mitchell's training took over. Battle stations. All hands to combat positions. Raise shields. Charge weapons. Alarms blared throughout the ship. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, but Mitchell could see the shock on their faces. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be a simple exercise. On the tactical display, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Council ships were scattering in panic, their ceremonial formation dissolving like sand in water. More ships were dying every second, torn apart by Kresh weapons that were far more powerful than anything the lightly armed Council vessels could handle. The communication channels flooded with panicked voices. "This is Council ship Harmony, we're taking heavy damage, shields failing. We must retreat to hyperspace immediately. Our engines need 3 minutes to charge. We don't have 3 minutes. They're everywhere, we can't." The transmission cut off as another Council ship died. Mitchell's mind raced. The Endeavor's hyperspace engines could charge in 90 seconds, faster than any Council ship. They could run. They could survive. That would be the smart, logical thing to do. She looked at the tactical display. 5 Council ships were already gone. No, 6. 7 now. And the attack had only started 30 seconds ago. In the observation deck, through the internal window, she could see Trill 9 watching her. The Valurian observer's compound eyes reflected the red emergency lights of the bridge. Something changed in Mitchell at that moment. Something shifted. A switch flipped in her brain, in her genes, in the deep evolutionary programming that had made humans the apex predators of Earth. Her crew felt it too. She could see it happening to them. The panic drained from their faces, replaced by something colder. Something older. Their movements became sharper, more efficient. Eyes narrowed, focusing with predatory intensity. "Belay that hyperspace charge," Mitchell said, and her voice had dropped half an octave without her consciously intending it. The friendly, diplomatic captain was gone. In her place was something ancient, something that her ancestors had carried through ice ages and across hostile continents. Weapons status: Lieutenant Davis. Robert Davis at the tactical station responded without hesitation, his voice now flat and emotionless. "All business. All weapons charged and ready, Captain. 9 railgun batteries, 42 missiles, point defense lasers online. But Captain, the Kresh flagship alone outmasses us 12 to 1. They have 47 weapons batteries to our 9. Mitchell stared at the tactical display, at the massive Kresh dreadnought that was systematically destroying the Council fleet. It was hunting them, she realized. Picking them off one by one like a wolf among sheep. Well, she thought. Time to show them what happens when a wolf meets another wolf. Then we'll have to be better than they are, Mitchell said quietly. She leaned forward in her command chair, and for the first time in 30 years of peaceful human-alien relations, she let the mask slip completely away. "Mr. Davis, broadcast our tactical feed on all Council frequencies." Davis hesitated for only a second. "Captain, that will let the Kresh see everything we do." "I know. But it will also let the Council see." Mitchell turned her head slightly, making direct eye contact with Trill 9 through the observation deck window. Those forward-facing predator eyes locked onto the Valurian observer with perfect binocular focus. They wanted to know what humans are really like. Time to show them. She turned back to the main view screen, where the Kresh flagship was visible in the distance, backlit by the burning wreckage of Council ships. And Captain Laura Mitchell smiled. It wasn't the diplomatic smile of Ambassador Jackson. It wasn't friendly or reassuring or civilized. It was the smile of a predator that had just found prey. "Helm," she said softly, "full attack speed. Target their flagship. Let's teach these bastards what real hunters look like." The sensor screens were filled with red warning signs. Angela Baker, the young sensor operator who had just been joking with her crewmates, felt her stomach drop as she tried to figure out what she was seeing. Her hands flew over the console as she ran the diagnostic 3 times because what she saw couldn't be real. "Contact confirmed," she said, her voice shaking. "Kresh horde signatures. Several ships coming out of the nebula. But that's not possible. They've been gone for 200 years. As soon as she said the words, the whole nebula seemed to light up. Like sharks coming out of dirty water, dozens of ships appeared from the swirling gas clouds. They were ugly ships with sharp angles and weapons that were always on display. Their only purpose was to kill. The first bolt of plasma hit the Council ship Serenity. The beautiful ship, with its hull covered in detailed carvings that told the story of its species over the course of 1,000 years, just disappeared. It was there for a moment, a beautiful piece of art and engineering. There was a flash of light and then a cloud of vaporized metal that kept growing. Then the Kresh really started to shoot. In the blink of an eye, 3 more Council ships went down. The ceremonial shields that were supposed to protect against small asteroids and space debris might as well have been made of paper. The Kresh plasma weapons went right through them. The ships didn't even have time to send out distress signals. They were just gone. "Oh God," Peterson whispered at the helm as he looked at his screens in horror. "Oh God, they're all going to die." The ways people talked to each other went crazy. All of the Council ships were screaming at the same time, and their voices were all mixed up in a panic and terror. "This is the Harmony. We're being attacked. A lot of breaches. We need retreat. Everyone go back to hyperspace coordinates. Our engines need some time to charge. 3 minutes at least. We don't have 3 minutes. They're blocking our..." The transmission stopped when another ship blew up. Next, another. The Kresh were organized, effective, and cruel. They aimed their fire at one ship at a time, breaking through its defenses and completely destroying it before moving on to the next target. They weren't just fighting. They were out hunting. Trill 9 watched the Council fleet die through the big windows on the observation deck of the Endeavour. His many legs shook. The Valurians, his species, had evolved on a world where there were no big predators and everything was peaceful. Some species had instincts for violence, but they never did. Seeing such random destruction brought out something primal in his brain, pure, overwhelming fear. He looked through the internal window at the bridge, expecting to see the same fear in the people. People had been peaceful, diplomatic, and friendly for 30 years after all. they would be just as scared as he was. What he saw instead made him feel cold in a way he had never felt before. People had changed. Lieutenant Peterson, who had been smiling and talking casually just 10 minutes ago, was now sitting still at his desk. His face was blank and emotionless, and his eyes were glued to his controls. His hands moved over the helm controls with the precision of a machine. Angela Baker at sensors had stopped shaking. She was no longer afraid, instead she was coldly calculating. She read the readings in a flat, emotionless voice, taking in information about the attacking ships without showing any signs of panic. Robert Davis at the tactical station was completely still. His eyes darted quickly across his screens as he figured out how to fire and how dangerous the situation was. He was breathing more slowly. He was relaxed but ready, like a spring that was coiled up. Captain Mitchell stood in the middle of the bridge like a statue. She wasn't freaking out. She wasn't yelling orders in a panic. She stood there perfectly still, staring at the tactical display with a level of focus that was almost scary. She was watching the biggest crush ship with the focus of a hawk watching a rabbit. "Weapons hot," Mitchell said, and her voice made Trill 9 jump. It was not the same. More profound. Colder. The captain who had been friendly and professional when he first met him was no longer there. This was a different person. "All batteries charged, Captain," Davis said right away. His voice had changed as well. It was flat, emotionless, and almost mechanical. "Helm full attack speed. Take us right to their flagship." Before the words were even finished, Peterson's hands moved. The Endeavour sped up, and its engines screamed at full power. Trill 9 couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Captain, you need to pull back with the other ships. Your hyperspace engines can charge up faster than ours so you can get away." He didn't even look at Mitchell. She never took her eyes off the tactical display. "No. But you'll die. That ship is really big. Your ship is very small in comparison." "Mr. Davis," Mitchell said as if Trill 9 hadn't said anything, "broadcast our tactical feed on all council frequencies. I want every ship that is still afloat to know exactly what we're doing." Davis stopped for a second. "Captain, that means the Kresh will see everything too. They'll know everything about our plans, strategies, and more." "I know. Do it anyway." "Now broadcasting, Captain. Our feed is going to all of the council's ships." Trill 9 looked at the tactical display on the observation deck. He could tell what Mitchell was going to do. The Endeavour was breaking formation, leaving the defensive sphere and speeding straight toward the Kresh flagship. Not going back. Not helping the other ships in the council. Like a missile aimed at a target, they just charged straight at the biggest and most dangerous enemy ship. It was crazy. It was suicide. "Captain Mitchell, please think again." Trill 9's translator had a hard time getting across how scared he was. "That ship is 12 times heavier than yours. It has 47 weapon batteries while you only have 9. Your shields can't possibly stand up to their firepower. This is crazy." Finally, Mitchell turned to face him. And at that moment, Trill 9 understood why some species in the galaxy had eyes that looked forward. Those eyes weren't just for looking. They were for locking onto a target with perfect accuracy. To keep an eye on prey with unwavering focus. For figuring out the exact distance and angle needed to deal a fatal blow. There was no panic or fear in Mitchell's eyes. They were cold, calculating, and completely focused. And she was happy. Not a smile that shows you're nervous. A smile that isn't friendly. Something else altogether. Something that made Trill 9 want to step back, even though there was reinforced glass between them. "Then we have to be better than them," Mitchell said in a low voice. She went back to her crew. "Mr. Davis, aim their sensor arrays. I want them to be blind before we get close enough to use weapons. Targeting solutions have been worked out. Ready on your mark, Captain." "Mr. Peterson, evasive pattern Delta 7. At random times. Don't let them get a good grip on us." "Got it, Captain." Starting to move in a way that avoids danger. The Endeavour started to weave through space. Because it was smaller, it could change direction faster than the huge Kresh ships could follow. Plasma bolts sizzled by them, missing by meters. The ship shook as near misses heated its shields, but Peterson kept them moving, dancing through the gunfire like a boxer dodging punches. "In 20 seconds we'll be in weapons range," Davis said. Mitchell leaned forward a little and held on to the armrests of her command chair. "All batteries fire when I say so. Aim for their forward sensor cluster. I want it to go away." Trill 9 saw the range counter go down. 15 seconds. 10 seconds. Mark in 5 seconds. The Endeavour's railguns made noise. The Kresh used flashy plasma weapons, but railguns were simple. They just shot pieces of metal at very high speeds. But simple did work. At a speed that was a large part of the speed of light, the magnetic accelerators sent 9 tungsten penetrators into space. All 9 rounds hit within 2 meters of the Kresh flagship's forward sensor array. The array blew up, sending sparks and debris flying everywhere. The Kresh flagship's firing became less accurate right away. Part of their targeting systems weren't working. Their next volley of plasma bolts went wide and missed the Endeavour by dozens of meters. Their forward sensors are down, Davis said, and Trill 9 could hear something different in his voice. Not really an emotion but a feeling of satisfaction. Like a craftsman who appreciates good work. They're making up for it with secondary arrays, but their targeting efficiency has gone down by 37%. Keep firing. Hit their secondary sensors. Keep them in the dark. The Endeavour shot again. And again. Every volley was carefully aimed, and every shot was meant to make it as hard as possible for the Kresh ship to see and aim. The people on board weren't trying to destroy the huge ship. They couldn't do it with their smaller weapons. They were being smarter. They were breaking it down bit by bit. The Kresh flagship tried to turn so that new weapon batteries could be used. But the Endeavour was quicker. Peterson knew the move was coming and rolled the ship, keeping them out of the Kresh vessel's blind spot, which was where their broken sensors couldn't get accurate targeting data. "They're trying to flush us out," Peterson said calmly. "Firing blindly into our area. Let them waste bullets. Stay in their shadow. Stay close." The Endeavour hugged the Kresh flagship like a remora on a shark, moving when it did and staying in places where the big ship's weapons couldn't reach without risking hitting their own hull. The surviving ships were watching the tactical feed in stunned silence on all of the Council channels. The screaming and panic had stopped. As they watched a tiny human ship dance around a ship 12 times its size, there was only shocked, disbelieving silence. "How are they doing that?" someone whispered over the channel. "Impossible," another voice said. "Their reaction times? No organic crew should be that quick." But they really were that fast. The Kresh didn't expect human reflexes to be as fast as they were. Humans had been hunting prey and avoiding predators on a world where everything wanted to kill them for millions of years. People's brains could figure out trajectories and vectors in less than a second when they were tracking fast-moving targets. The Kresh couldn't match the accuracy with which human hands, which evolved to make and use tools, could operate controls. The Kresh flagship hit something. A plasma bolt hit the Endeavour's port side, and Trill 9 felt the whole ship shake. The alarms went off. Reports of damage came in quickly. "Direct hit, port side," Davis said. "Break in the hull in sections 12 through 18. There have been reports of casualties. Shields are down to 40%. Trill 9 thought there would be panic. Thought the people would finally give up and run. But Mitchell's vital signs, which were shown on her observer console, showed that her heart rate was actually going down. She was getting calmer. "Seal those parts. Redirect power from damaged areas to weapons and forward shields." "Captain, we have wounded in Section 15, said the medical officer over the intercom. "Dr. Anderson, check them out and put them in order of importance. Get everyone who can still work back to their posts. We're not done yet." "Got it, Captain." Trill 9's monitor showed Dr. Rachel Anderson in the medical bay a few minutes later. While giving orders to her medical team, she was also injecting herself with something. Her left arm stopped at the elbow, and the stump was quickly sealed with a medical cauterizer. She had cut off her own arm when falling debris crushed it, treated the wound herself and gone back to work. She saw Trill 9 looking at her and gave him a quick nod before going back to helping other injured crew members. Trill 9 felt something inside him break. For 30 years, these people had acted like they were soft, civilized and peaceful. But they had been lying. Or maybe they weren't lying, maybe they were hiding. Covering up what they really were. The Endeavour got hit again. Then one more. The ship was being ripped apart, piece by piece. But it never backed down. It kept firing all the time. It went around the Kresh flagship like a wolf circling a hurt elk, striking and then dancing away before the counterattack could hit. Davis said, "Their shield generators are failing. Figure 70 seconds until it falls apart completely." Mitchell's smile got a little bigger. "Get the boarding teams ready." The translator for Trill 9 didn't work. "Teams that board? You want to get on their ship?" Mitchell looked right at him again for the first time since the battle began. Trill 9 felt his blood run cold when he saw those predator eyes looking right at him with perfect binocular focus. People weren't just fighting to stay alive. They weren't fighting to get away. They were fighting to win. To completely and utterly beat their enemy. To get rid of the threat so completely that it would never threaten anyone again. "We're not here to chase them away, observer," Mitchell said softly. "We're here to kill them. For good. She went back to her crew. Lieutenant Wilson, get your Marines ready. Their command deck will be the point of breach. If you can take it whole. Not if. Her voice got harder. Make sure they can't send a warning to the rest of their fleet. Got it, Captain. The Marines are getting ready now. The Endeavour fired one last shot. The shields on the Kresh flagship flickered and then went out. The unprotected hull was ripped open by the human weapons, which tore through corridors and broke systems. Council leaders watched the tactical feed from 17 different worlds across the galaxy and finally understood what they had led into their civilization. Not a peaceful species that had grown out of violence, but a top predator that was just waiting for the right time to show its teeth. The Kresh plasma bolt hit like a hammer from the underworld. The whole ship tipped to the side, sending anyone who wasn't strapped down flying across the deck. The explosion tore a 20-meter-long hole in the hull of the Endeavour on the port side. A stream of frozen air, water vapor, and spinning debris rushed out of the atmosphere into space. The bridge was lit up by red emergency lights. Every speaker blared alarm klaxons. Reports of damage came in from a dozen different areas all at once. 3 compartments had fires in them. The power lines were cut. Parts of the ship were completely open to vacuum. Trill 9 held on to his observation chair with all of his limbs, and his compound eyes were wide with fear. This was it. Now the people would have to go back. No species could take this kind of damage and keep fighting. It couldn't be done. Crazy. They would turn on their hyperspace engines and run away like any smart person would. But when he looked at his observer console, he saw something that couldn't be happening. There were Captain Mitchell's vital signs: heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, and stress hormones. All command staff must follow standard monitoring during council operations. Her heart rate was slowing down. Not up. Down. Mitchell's heart was slowing down in the middle of a battle. Her ship was falling apart around her, crew members were dying, and systems were failing. More steady. Better controlled. Before this mission, Trill 9 had learned a lot about human biology. He knew that when people are scared or stressed, their hearts beat faster. It was a basic survival response that sent more blood and oxygen to the muscles so they could fight or run away. What he saw didn't make sense from a biological point of view. If people weren't afraid at all. In the middle of the chaos, Mitchell stood still on the bridge. Her hands weren't shaking. There was no wavering in her voice. She looked almost at ease. Seal sections 12 through 18, she said, and her voice cut through the alarms perfectly. Emergency bulkheads, full lockdown. Not one. Sealing now, Captain, said the officer in charge of damage control. Venting has stopped. Sections are cut off. Okay. Redirect all power from life support systems in the damaged areas. Send it to the forward shields and weapons batteries. Peterson looked back at the helm for a moment, and a look of doubt crossed his face. Captain, that means anyone who is still alive in those parts, Mitchell finished by saying, will understand why it's necessary. Her tone wasn't mean. It was just a matter of fact, like someone making a clear choice based on logic. We need those shields to work more than we need life support in areas that are in danger. Do what you're told. Yes, Captain. The medical channel started to work. Bridge, this is the medical bay. We have a lot of injured people coming in. In Section 15 there are serious injuries. Asking for permission to set up triage there. Captain, this is Dr. Anderson. Check out the injuries and decide which ones need treatment first. People who can go back to work in 10 minutes or less are treated first. Critical cases are stabilized and kept. Anyone who can still fight needs to be at their station. There was a short break in the channel. Then Dr. Anderson's voice came back, and Trill 9 heard something in it that made his skin crawl. Complete, cold understanding. Got it, Captain. Putting personnel who are ready for combat first. Out with Anderson. Trill 9 couldn't believe what he saw on his screens. The doctor didn't ask any questions about the order. Hadn't complained that her job was to save lives, not sort them by how valuable they were in battle. She had just accepted it and moved on. The Kresh flagship shot again. This time the Endeavour rolled hard to the left, and the plasma bolt missed by less than 50 meters. The heat from the near miss still burned the hull plating, leaving black scorch marks on the white paint that said the ship's name. Davis yelled, "They're getting better at aiming. They've made up for the damage to the sensor. The next shot will probably hit. Then don't let them have another chance." Peterson, pattern Echo 9. Keep us going. The Endeavour twisted and dove, and because it was smaller, it could do things that would tear a bigger ship apart. The people on board worked together perfectly, each one knowing what the others needed without being told. It was like seeing a single organism with many parts that all worked together for the same goal. Suddenly, Trill9's medical monitor flickered and showed a new picture. The feed was coming from the medical bay, and what he saw made him want to look away but he couldn't. The medical bay looked like a nightmare, and Dr. Rachel Anderson was in the middle of it. Crew members who were hurt were lying on beds and floors. There was blood, human blood, that was red like the emergency lights all over the place. Medical staff rushed from one patient to the next, frantically trying to stop bleeding, seal wounds, and keep the dying stable. Anderson stood in the middle of it all, using her right hand to inject something into her own neck. Because she didn't have a left arm. The stump was covered in white medical gel that had hardened into a temporary seal. It ended just below the elbow. The wound was cauterized, which means that the flesh was burned to stop the bleeding. Trill9 could see the bone, which was white and stark, before the gel completely covered it. There was a piece of structural debris on the floor nearby that was covered in blood. She must have been stuck when the ship hit. They must have known that the arm was so badly hurt that it couldn't be saved, not even with amputation surgery. She had used a medical laser cutter, which is made for precise surgery, to cut off her own arm at the elbow. Then she had cauterized it herself and gone back to work. She was in charge of her medical team while she treated her own wound. Her voice was steady, even though she must have been in a lot of pain that he was able to say, Trill9 to Dr. Anderson. Doctor, you need treatment right away. You have a lot of injuries. You should be in surgery. Anderson looked up at the screen and her eyes were drawn to the camera. The drugs she had injected had made her pupils bigger, but her eyes were sharp and focused. I've had treatment, observer. I'm able to do things. I can still work, so I need to be here. But your arm is gone. There's nothing I can do about that right now. She turned back to the injured engineer on the closest bed and checked his vital signs with her other hand. I need to give Captain Mitchell casualty reports and I need to do it. There are 47 injured, 12 of whom are in critical condition and 5 dead. 33 people have been treated and are now back on duty. You sent people who were hurt back to work? Trill9 couldn't believe what he was hearing. Yes, I've sent people with minor injuries back to their posts. Broken fingers, small burns and concussions. They can still use the controls. We need all of our crew members who can work right now. She gave the injured engineer something that made him gasp and sit up, even though his chest was burned badly. Me too. She hung up before Trill9 could answer, so he was left with a blank screen. Another Kresh weapon hit the ship, making it shake again. This time it hit the starboard side at an angle, but it still tore through 2 decks and killed everyone in the observation lounge on the starboard side. The number of casualties on Trill9's monitor went up. 7 people have died. 53 people were hurt. But the Endeavor didn't stop. Didn't back down. It seemed to move faster and more aggressively, like an injured animal that becomes more dangerous when hurt. Incoming fire from the port side. Davis yelled. The ship rolled, turned, and duffed. The plasma bolt missed by inches, so close that Trill9 could see the glow through the windows of the bridge. Return fire, Mitchell told them. Aim for their port weapons array. The Endeavor's railguns made noise again. 3 direct hits. The Kresh flagship's port side blew up when the ammunition stores blew up, and secondary explosions rippled along its hull. Good shooting, Mr. Davis. Thanks, Captain. Suddenly, Davis's station sparked, and electricity shot across his control panel. Flames shot up from an open power line, and Trill9 saw Davis's hands get caught in the electrical discharge. The person jerked, and his body became stiff as electricity flowed through it. After that, the breaker broke and the power went out. Davis fell forward and smoke came out of his burned hands. After that, he stood up straight and got back to work. His hands were black and blistered and the skin was peeling. At least 3rd-degree burns. He must have been in a lot of pain. But he just bent his fingers once or twice to make sure they still worked and then kept using his controls that he said, "Station is damaged but still works," and his voice was perfectly steady. Moving to backup systems. Ready to fire when you say so. Trill9 realized he was making a sound, a high-pitched keening that his translator couldn't put into words. He was seeing something that couldn't happen. Something that went against everything he knew about biology and how people act. Pain was supposed to make you unable to do anything. You were supposed to run away when you were scared. Injuries were supposed to make you less effective in combat. But the people weren't following those rules. They just kept on fighting. Kept going. Kept attacking with the same cold accuracy as before or maybe even better. Another hit. The Endeavor's bottom hull broke open, sending the ship's water reserves into space in a beautiful frozen fountain. More alarms. More harm. More deaths. But Mitchell's heart rate stayed low and steady. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice never changed. Status of the shield? She asked calmly. 30% of the forward shields are up. Port shields are not working. Starboard at 45%. Send all available power to the shields in front. Take it off of everything else if you have to. Captain, that includes life support for the living areas. Just do it. We just need to breathe for a little while longer to finish this. The Endeavour circled the Kresh flagship like a predator circling prey that was hurt. Every pass brought another accurate burst of railgun fire. Another system has been destroyed. Another battery of weapons is quiet. The people were taking apart the bigger ship piece by piece, slowly breaking it down. Davis said, their shield generator is failing, and even though his hands were burned, his station was broken and sparks were still coming from his console, he sounded happy. Changes all over their shield envelope. It will take about 70 seconds for everything to fall apart. Mitchell leaned forward a little in her command chair. Lieutenant Wilson, get Alpha and Bravo squads ready to board. This time, Trill9's translator really did break down and made a noise like gears grinding. Boarding? You mean to get on their ship? Breaching point will be their command deck, Mitchell said, ignoring him. Try to keep it safe if you can. If you can, keep their command staff alive. But the main goal is to stop them from sending a distress signal to the rest of the Kresh fleet. Got it, Captain. Marines are getting ready to fight now. Trill9 finally spoke up. Captain Mitchell, this is crazy. Your ship is broken. You don't have enough people. The Kresh are vicious fighters who fight with their hands. Their species evolved to be the best predators. You can't possibly. Finally, Mitchell turned to look at him, and Trill9's words died in his throat. Those eyes. Those predator eyes that looked forward that he had argued against in the council chambers. They were completely focused on him, and in that moment he understood exactly why predators needed binocular vision. It wasn't just to see how deep it was. It was to follow prey so closely that they couldn't get away. Observer, we're not here to chase them away, Mitchell said quietly. Her voice was calm, logical, and almost like she was talking to someone. But there was something old and scary underneath it. We're here to get rid of the threat. For good. The Kresh attacked ships from the Council. They killed the crews of the Council. If we let them go, they'll do it again. And again. And again. But you're hurt. You're outmatched. We are hurt. There is a difference. Mitchell got up from her command chair, and Trill9 saw that she was leaning to the left. At some point during the battle she had also been hurt. But she and her crew just ignored it. The Kresh won't stop hunting Council species. Not until someone shows them what it's like to be hunted. Not until someone shows them what real predators look like. She turned back to the main screen where the Kresh flagship, which was huge, deadly, and full of weapons, filled the view. And what about people? Mitchell's voice got even lower. We used stone-tipped spears to hunt mammoths to death. We walked across ice ages. We made it through wars, plagues, and natural disasters that would have killed any other species. We made it to the top of the food chain in a world where everything was trying to kill us. She turned around to look at Trill9 one more time, and that awful smile came back. Observer, we are very, very good at being predators. You never asked us to show it to you before. The shields on the Kresh flagship's tactical display flickered and then went out. Davis said, shields are down. They can't defend themselves. Mitchell nodded once. Fire. The Endeavor's weapons tore through the unprotected hull, ripping open hallways and breaking through the command deck. Air flowed out of the wounds in sparkling streams. You are now on the boarding teams. Take that ship. And 20 human Marines, armed and armored and with their own predator eyes looking forward, charged at the Kresh flagship. Trill9 watched in horror and with understanding. For 30 years people had been acting. The mask was off now. And the galaxy was about to find out what people really were. The engines of the Kresh flagship lit up bright blue as they worked to their full power. The huge dreadnought, which was still leaving behind debris and atmosphere from its damaged hull, turned away from the battlefield and ran. When you can't immediately crush an enemy, retreat, regroup, and strike again later when you have the advantage. This is what the commander of Kresh warriors had done for thousands of years. It was a good plan for the military. It had worked against a lot of enemies on a lot of worlds. But the Kresh had never fought people before. The damaged Endeavour, which was leaving behind its own plume of venting gases and sparking electrical systems, quickly turned to follow. The gap between the two ships grew larger as the bigger Kresh ship moved ahead. Its engines were stronger, so it was faster. Trill9 felt a wave of relief when he saw the pursuit course on the tactical display. The people had won. They had driven the Kresh flagship away, saved the rest of the Council fleet, and shown how good they were at fighting. Now they could go back to the other ships, fix things, take care of their wounded, and accept the Council's thanks. Captain Mitchell, Trill 9 said, and his translator made sure to convey the right amount of urgency. The Kresh are running away. You have one. You need to go back to the Council fleet. Your ship needs a lot of repairs. Your injured people need the right medical care. You've done more than enough. Mitchell didn't even look at him. She kept her eyes on the tactical display that showed the Kresh flagship moving away. Mr. Davis, how far away is the target? Davis looked at his screens and carefully moved his burned hands over the controls. 40,000 kilometers and going up. They're getting ahead. Their top speed is about 12% faster than ours right now when we're hurt. Helm, make sure their heading is exactly the same. Keep the highest sustainable pursuit speed. Peterson's hands moved around his desk. Matching course. Locked in pursuit speed. Trill 9's relief turned into confusion. Captain, you can't catch them. You can't catch them. This goal is useless. You should go back to, we're pursuing, Mitchell cut in, and her tone made it clear that the conversation was over. Mr. Davis, start a log of your pursuits. I want to know their course, speed, and engine efficiency all the time. Logging has begun, Captain. Trill 9 couldn't believe what he saw on his screens. He looked at the numbers 3 times to make sure he wasn't wrong. The Kresh flagship was faster. It was getting ahead. The gap was getting bigger by the minute. Simple math showed that the Endeavor would never catch up. The chase was pointless. Captain, Peterson said from the helm, and his voice was calm, as if he were talking about making routine course corrections instead of an impossible chase. We can't catch up to the target at these speeds. They keep a steady 12% speed edge. I know, Mitchell said. We don't need to go any faster. We just have to keep going. Trill 9 didn't get it. His translator tried to understand the words, but they didn't make sense in a tactical way. Captain, please, I don't understand your plan. Why chase them if you can't catch them? For the first time since the chase started, Mitchell turned to look at him. The Predator's smile was still there, cold and patient. Observer, they'll have to stop at some point. And we won't. She turned around and looked at her crew. Captain, to all departments. We're chasing the Kresh flagship. We don't know how long it will take to catch up, but it could take longer. Set condition 2 all over the ship. Set up schedules for all stations to rotate. I want everyone to be able to rest, eat, and get medical care when they need it, but we are always on the lookout for them. Not one. The hours started to go by. Trill 9's anxiety grew as he watched the clock. 1 hour. 2 hours. 3 hours. The Kresh flagship stayed in the lead, staying 40 to 50,000 kilometers ahead. The Endeavor came next, never getting ahead or behind. Trill 9 sent his first report to the Council after 5 hours. The human ship keeps chasing the Kresh flagship even though it can't get any closer. It's not clear what the tactical reasoning is. Observation should continue, they said. The Kresh flagship showed no signs of slowing down after 8 hours. The Endeavor didn't either. Trill 9 sent another report at 12 o'clock. Chase is still on. The human crew should be very tired. Asking for help deciding if intervention is necessary. But he didn't see tiredness in the people on the bridge. He saw something else. Yes, the people were working in shifts. Another helmsman would take over for Peterson and fly the ship for 4 hours while Peterson took a break. Davis would give tactical control to his second-in-command. The pattern was the same all over the ship. But rest wasn't the right word for what they were doing. Trill 9 got into the feeds from the internal cameras. He watched Peterson in his room while he was supposed to be resting. The pilot was lying on his bunk with his eyes closed, but his lips were moving. Trill 9 improved the sound and heard him mumbling, "Vector corrections at 42,000 clicks, account for drift, compensate starboard 3 degrees. He was piloting the ship while he slept. The medical staff who weren't on duty weren't sleeping either in the medical bay. While they were eating rations, they were also going over patient charts, figuring out how much medicine to give them and getting equipment ready for the next shift. Dr. Anderson was going through medical supplies with her one good hand while talking to her assistant about how to treat patients. Her missing arm was now properly dressed and sealed. The engineers who weren't working sat at tables in the crew mess hall, but they weren't relaxing. They were using portable tablets to look over damage reports, figure out which repairs were most important, and come up with temporary fixes for systems that were barely holding together. They were resting their bodies, but their minds were always busy. At 15 minutes past the hour, Trill 9 realized something that made him shiver. The people weren't taking turns resting. They were switching off so that each person could give their full attention to their task for a shorter amount of time and then switch to a different type of focus. But they never really stopped. At hour 19 something happened. Davis said, "Captain, the crash ship is slowing down." He had been back to work for 2 hours after a 4-hour break that Trill 9 thought didn't include any real sleeping. Engine temperature readings show that it is getting too hot. They have to slow down to cool off. Mitchell leaned forward in her seat. She had been on the bridge for all of those 19 hours. She hadn't gone anywhere. "Keep going. Get closer. But don't get too close to the weapons yet." The crash flagship slowed down and the Endeavour crept closer. 35,000 kilometers. 30,000, 25,000. The crash engines flared up again and the flagship sped up again, pulling away. "They've finished their cooling cycle," Davis said. "Speeding up to full speed again." "Let them go," Mitchell said in a calm voice. "Write down the time. 19 hours and 14 minutes until their first forced cooldown. Mr. Davis, figure out how efficient their engine is and guess when the next cooldown will be." Davis's fingers moved over the controls. "Based on how quickly they lose heat and how stressed their engines are right now, we think the next forced cooldown will happen in about 18 hours. "Okay. We will wait." The cycle started over. The crash would go as fast as they could until their engines got too hot. Then they would have to slow down for 30 to 40 minutes to let the systems cool down. The Endeavour would get closer during that time. After that, the crash would run again. But each time the crash ran, it got a little shorter before it got too hot. And they needed a little longer to cool down each time. The Endeavour just kept coming. At hour 23, Trill 9 sent another report to the Council. This time, his confusion had turned into something close to fear. "The humans won't stop chasing us. They have been chasing for almost a whole standard day. The crew must be very tired by now. But based on what I've seen, people aren't acting according to normal biological rules." The crash took their third break to cool down at hour 28. This time, it lasted 50 minutes instead of 30. Trill 9 couldn't keep quiet any longer at 1:35. "Captain Mitchell, you need to stop this chase. Your crew needs to really rest. Get enough sleep. Your ship needs to be fixed. This is hurting your ship and your crew." Finally, Mitchell looked at him, and Trill 9 could see that her eyes were red from not getting enough sleep. Her face was in the dark. But those eyes were still sharp, still focused, and still locked on their prey with a steady intensity. "Observer, let me tell you about persistence hunting," she said in a low voice. "It's how my ancestors lived on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years. We weren't the fastest hunters. We weren't the strongest. But we had one thing that nothing else did." She pointed to the tactical display which showed the crash flagship still running and trying to get away. "We could follow prey for days." "Days, really?" "We would follow an antelope or a deer that we had tracked. Follow it. Go after it. Not stopping. Never letting it sleep. The prey would run until it was too tired, until its muscles gave out, and then it would stop running. After that, we would walk up to it and kill it." She looked back at the display. "We didn't need to be faster. We just had to keep going." The crash flagship was showing serious signs of strain after 40 hours. The engine was only working at 70% of its full capacity. Their breaks to cool down were now lasting more than an hour. And they were happening more often. Davis told something new at hour 43. "Captain, their engine signature is changing. Stress fractures in the systems that keep them cool. If they keep going at this speed, their engine is going to break down." "How long?" "Maybe 4 more hours. Maybe not as much." Mitchell nodded slowly. "They'll stop before that. They'll find a place where they can defend themselves and stand their ground." "Mr. Peterson, open the star charts. What's next for them on this course?" Peterson's fingers moved quickly over his console. He had been on duty for 6 hours straight, but his hands were still steady. "The Kelvin system. The system is dead and there are no planets worth living on. But there is a thick asteroid field and some old mining stations. It would be good ground for an ambush." Mitchell said with confidence, "That's where they'll go. They'll hide in the asteroids and use them as cover. Then they'll make us come to them on their terms." "How do you know that?" "Why?" Trill 9 asked. "Because that's what I would do." For the first time in 43 hours, Mitchell got up from her command chair. She swayed a little, steadied herself, and then stood up straight. "Everyone, this is the captain. The Kresh are going to fight in the Kelvin system. We have been chasing them for almost 2 days. We hurt them. We've worn them out. Now we're going to finish them." She looked around at the people on her bridge. They were hurt, burned, and tired. But when she looked at them, they looked back with the same cold focus they'd had since the battle started. "They're apex predators where they come from," Mitchell said. "Warriors who are proud and have never lost a hunt. But they did make one mistake. They attacked a type of animal that lived on a world where death was common. A species that lived through ice ages, plagues, and extinction events because of one simple trait. She had that awful predator smile. "We never give up," she said. "No matter how long it takes. No matter how bad it hurts. We never stop until the prey is dead." The Kresh flagship entered the Kelver system at 47 hours and dove into the asteroid field, where it vanished among the rocks. Next came the Endeavor. Trill9 finally understood what he was seeing as he sat in his observation chair. The Council had spent 30 years looking at how humans use technology, how they negotiate, and how they trade. They had learned about language, culture, and art. But they had never asked the right question. They'd never thought about what would happen if you gave spaceships to a persistence predator, which is an animal that evolved to chase prey until it dies from exhaustion. Now they were learning. Trill9 thought the galaxy would never be the same again. The engines of the Kresh flagship lit up bright blue as they worked to their full power. The huge dreadnought, which was still leaving behind debris and atmosphere from its damaged hull, turned away from the battlefield and ran. When you can't immediately crush an enemy, retreat, regroup, and strike again later when you have the advantage. This is what the commander of Kresh warriors had done for thousands of years. It was a good plan for the military. It had worked against a lot of enemies on a lot of worlds. But the Kresh had never fought people before. The damaged Endeavor, which was leaving behind its own plume of venting gases and sparking electrical systems, quickly turned to follow. The gap between the two ships grew larger as the bigger Kresh ship moved ahead. Its engines were stronger, so it was faster. Trill9 felt a wave of relief when he saw the pursuit course on the tactical display. The people had won. They had driven the Kresh flagship away, saved the rest of the Council fleet, and shown how good they were at fighting. Now they could go back to the other ships, fix things, take care of their wounded, and accept the Council's thanks. "Captain Mitchell," Trill9 said, and his translator made sure to convey the right amount of urgency. "The Kresh are running away. You have won. You need to go back to the Council fleet. Your ship needs a lot of repairs. Your injured people need the right medical care. You've done more than enough." Mitchell didn't even look at him. She kept her eyes on the tactical display that showed the Kresh flagship moving away. "Mr. Davis, how far away is the target?" Davis looked at his screens and carefully moved his burned hands over the controls. 40,000 kilometers and going up. They're getting ahead. Their top speed is about 12% faster than ours right now when we're hurt. Helm, make sure their heading is exactly the same. Keep the highest sustainable pursuit speed. Peterson's hands moved around his desk. Matching course. Locked in pursuit speed. Trill9's relief turned into confusion. "Captain, you can't catch them. You can't catch them. This goal is useless. You should go back to, we're pursuing," Mitchell cut in, and her tone made it clear that the conversation was over. "Mr. Davis, start a log of your pursuits. I want to know their course, speed, and engine efficiency all the time." "Logging has begun, Captain." Trill9 couldn't believe what he saw on his screens. He looked at the numbers 3 times to make sure he wasn't wrong. The Kresh flagship was faster. It was getting ahead. The gap was getting bigger by the minute. Simple math showed that the Endeavor would never catch up. The chase was pointless. "Captain," Peterson said from the helm, and his voice was calm, as if he were talking about making routine course corrections instead of an impossible chase. "We can't catch up to the target at these speeds. They keep a steady 12% speed edge." "I know," Mitchell said. "We don't need to go any faster. We just have to keep going." Trill9 didn't get it. His translator tried to understand the words, but they didn't make sense in a tactical way. "Captain, please, I don't understand your plan. Why chase them if you can't catch them?" For the first time since the chase started, Mitchell turned to look at him. The Predator's smile was still there, cold and patient. "Observer, they'll have to stop at some point. And we won't." She turned around and looked at her crew. "Captain, to all departments. We're chasing the Kresh flagship. We don't know how long it will take to catch up, but it could take longer. Set condition 2 all over the ship. Set up schedules for all stations to rotate. I want everyone to be able to rest, eat, and get medical care when they need it, but we are always on the lookout for them. Not one." The hours started to go by. Trill9's anxiety grew as he watched the clock. 1 hour. 2 hours. 3 hours. The Kresh flagship stayed in the lead, staying 40 to 50,000 kilometers ahead. The Endeavor came next, never getting ahead or behind. Trill9 sent his first report to the Council after 5 hours. "The human ship keeps chasing the Kresh flagship even though it can't get any closer. It's not clear what the tactical reasoning is. Observation should continue," they said. The Kresh flagship showed no signs of slowing down after 8 hours. The Endeavour didn't either. Trill 9 sent another report at 12 o'clock. Chase is still on. The human crew should be very tired. Asking for help deciding if intervention is necessary. But he didn't see tiredness in the people on the bridge. He saw something else. Yes, the people were working in shifts. Another helmsman would take over for Peterson and fly the ship for 4 hours while Peterson took a break. Davis would give tactical control to his second-in-command. The pattern was the same all over the ship. But rest wasn't the right word for what they were doing. Trill 9 got into the feeds from the internal cameras. He watched Peterson in his room while he was supposed to be resting. The pilot was lying on his bunk with his eyes closed, but his lips were moving. Trill 9 improved the sound and heard him mumbling, "Vector corrections at 42,000 clicks, account for drift, compensate starboard 3 degrees." He was piloting the ship while he slept. The medical staff who weren't on duty weren't sleeping either in the medical bay. While they were eating rations, they were also going over patient charts, figuring out how much medicine to give them and getting equipment ready for the next shift. Dr. Anderson was going through medical supplies with her one good hand while talking to her assistant about how to treat patients. Her missing arm was now properly dressed and sealed. The engineers who weren't working sat at tables in the crew mess hall, but they weren't relaxing. They were using portable tablets to look over damage reports, figure out which repairs were most important, and come up with temporary fixes for systems that were barely holding together. They were resting their bodies, but their minds were always busy. At 15 minutes past the hour, Trill 9 realized something that made him shiver. The people weren't taking turns resting. They were switching off so that each person could give their full attention to their task for a shorter amount of time and then switch to a different type of focus. But they never really stopped. At hour 19 something happened. Davis said, "Captain, the Kresh ship is slowing down." He had been back to work for 2 hours after a 4-hour break that Trill 9 thought didn't include any real sleeping. Engine temperature readings show that it is getting too hot. They have to slow down to cool off. Mitchell leaned forward in her seat. She had been on the bridge for all of those 19 hours. She hadn't gone anywhere. Keep going. Get closer. But don't get too close to the weapons yet. The Kresh flagship slowed down and the Endeavour crept closer. 35,000 kilometers. 30,000, 25,000. The Kresh engines flared up again and the flagship sped up again, pulling away. "They've finished their cooling cycle," Davis said. "Speeding up to full speed again." "Let them go," Mitchell said in a calm voice. "Write down the time. 19 hours and 14 minutes until their first forced cooldown. Mr. Davis, figure out how efficient their engine is and guess when the next cooldown will be." Davis's fingers moved over the controls. "Based on how quickly they lose heat and how stressed their engines are right now, we think the next forced cooldown will happen in about 18 hours. "Okay. We will wait." The cycle started over. The Kresh would go as fast as they could until their engines got too hot. Then they would have to slow down for 30 to 40 minutes to let the systems cool down. The Endeavour would get closer during that time. After that, the Kresh would run again. But each time the Kresh ran, it got a little shorter before it got too hot. And they needed a little longer to cool down each time. The Endeavour just kept coming. At hour 23, Trill 9 sent another report to the Council. This time, his confusion had turned into something close to fear. "The humans won't stop chasing us. They have been chasing for almost a whole standard day. The crew must be very tired by now. But based on what I've seen, people aren't acting according to normal biological rules." The Kresh took their third break to cool down at hour 28. This time, it lasted 50 minutes instead of 30. Trill 9 couldn't keep quiet any longer at 1:35. "Captain Mitchell, you need to stop this chase. Your crew needs to really rest. Get enough sleep. Your ship needs to be fixed. This is hurting your ship and your crew." Finally, Mitchell looked at him, and Trill 9 could see that her eyes were red from not getting enough sleep. Her face was in the dark. But those eyes were still sharp, still focused, and still locked on their prey with a steady intensity. "Observer, let me tell you about persistence hunting," she said in a low voice. "It's how my ancestors lived on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years. We weren't the fastest hunters. We weren't the strongest. But we had one thing that nothing else did." She pointed to the tactical display which showed the Kresh flagship still running and trying to get away. "We could follow prey for days." "Days, really?" "We would follow an antelope or a deer that we had tracked. Follow it. Go after it. Not stopping. Never letting it sleep. The prey would run until it was too tired, until its muscles gave out, and then it would stop running. After that, we would walk up to it and kill it." She looked back at the display. "We didn't need to be faster. We just had to keep going. The Kresh flagship was showing serious signs of strain after 40 hours. The engine was only working at 70% of its full capacity. Their breaks to cool down were now lasting more than an hour. And they were happening more often. Davis told something new at hour 43. Captain, their engine signature is changing. Stress fractures in the systems that keep them cool. If they keep going at this speed, their engine is going to break down. How long? Maybe 4 more hours. Maybe not as much. Mitchell nodded slowly. They'll stop before that. They'll find a place where they can defend themselves and stand their ground. Mr. Peterson, open the star charts. What's next for them on this course? Peterson's fingers moved quickly over his console. He had been on duty for 6 hours straight, but his hands were still steady. The Kelver system. The system is dead and there are no planets worth living on. But there is a thick asteroid field and some old mining stations. It would be good ground for an ambush. Mitchell said with confidence, that's where they'll go. They'll hide in the asteroids and use them as cover. Then they'll make us come to them on their terms. How do you know that? Why? Trill9 asked. Because that's what I would do. For the first time in 43 hours, Mitchell got up from her command chair. She swayed a little, steadied herself, and then stood up straight. Everyone, this is the captain. The Kresh are going to fight in the Kelver system. We have been chasing them for almost 2 days. We hurt them. We've worn them out. Now we're going to finish them. She looked around at the people on her bridge. They were hurt, burned, and tired. But when she looked at them, they looked back with the same cold focus they'd had since the battle started. They're apex predators where they come from, Mitchell said. Warriors who are proud and have never lost a hunt. But they did make one mistake. They attacked a type of animal that lived on a world where death was common. A species that lived through ice ages, plagues, and extinction events because of one simple trait. She had that awful predator smile. We never give up, she said. No matter how long it takes. No matter how bad it hurts. We never stop until the prey is dead. The Kresh flagship entered the Kelver system at 47 hours and dove into the asteroid field, where it vanished among the rocks. Next came the Endeavor. Trill9 finally understood what he was seeing as he sat in his observation chair. The Council had spent 30 years looking at how humans use technology, how they negotiate, and how they trade. They had learned about language, culture, and art. But they had never asked the right question. They'd never thought about what would happen if you gave spaceships to a persistence predator, which is an animal that evolved to chase prey until it dies from exhaustion. Now they were learning. Trill9 thought the galaxy would never be the same again. It looked like the Kresh flagship had been through a war all by itself. Long scorch marks covered its hull where the Endeavor's weapons had burned away armor. Parts of the ship were completely dark because the power systems were off. There were still a dozen holes in the hull that let air out, making small jets of frozen gas that sparkled in the light of the distant sun. The huge ship limped into the Kelver system like a hurt animal looking for a place to hide. And it found a place to hide in the asteroid field. There were a lot of rocks in the Kelver field and they were all different sizes from cars to mountains. They moved through space in random patterns, sometimes colliding with each other in huge explosions of crushed stone. It was the kind of place that navigation computers warn people about. Smart pilots stayed away from this kind of place. The Kresh flagship dove deep into the thickest part of the field and settled down between 2 huge asteroids, each one bigger than the ship itself. From there they could see anyone trying to get close and had perfect cover. It was a fortress made by nature. The Endeavor got to the edge of the Kelver system 3 hours later. The ship that belonged to the humans looked worse than the Kresh flagship. Even though there were temporary patches, the port side was still torn open. There were scorch marks on every surface. A lot of weapon batteries were just gone, blown away in the fighting. The ship shouldn't have been in a combat zone, it should have been in a repair dock. The crew, on the other hand, was ready. During the last few hours of the chase, Trill9 had seen them get ready. Yes, they had eaten and some of them had even taken short naps. But mostly they were ready for battle. The Marines checked their armor and cleaned their weapons. Engineers changed the way power systems worked to make up for broken circuits. Medical staff got ready for injuries. Captain Mitchell had been looking at the Kelver system star charts for 2 hours straight, and her eyes were moving across the screens with a scary intensity. The bridge crew moved with the same cold efficiency as they had during the 47-hour chase as they entered the system. No wasted movements. No talking that isn't necessary. Just focused and ready to hunt. Sensor sweep, Mitchell said. Davis moved his controls, and Trill9 watched as the tactical display filled up with information. There were a lot of red dots and warning signs in the asteroid field. And in the middle of all that mess, there was a much bigger contact. Davis said, "Contact found. The Kresh flagship is at coordinates 773 by 421 by 98. They've tucked themselves between two big asteroids, which is a good defensive position. Our sensors are having trouble getting clear readings through all the rock." "Smart," Mitchell said as he nodded slowly. "They're using the asteroids as cover and obstacles. They can see the obvious approach vectors and they've got their weapons aimed at them. Anyone who comes at them the straightforward way will get torn apart." Trill9 asked, "What do we do?" even though he didn't want to know the answer. Mitchell's lips turned into that awful smile. "We don't go at them the easy way." She went to her communications station. "Bridge to Armory. Mr. Wilson, what is the status of the boarding teams?" The speakers played Lieutenant Commander Thomas Wilson's voice. Wilson was in charge of the Endeavor's Marine Detachment. He was a small, strong man with gray hair that was just starting to show. Trill9 had seen him before when he helped his Marines check their gear with the care of someone who knew that lives depended on it being done right. Wilson said, "The Marines are ready and geared up, Captain." His voice was calm and professional, but you could tell he was excited. 20 effectives, full combat loadout. "We're ready to go when you say so." "Good. This fight will be up close and personal. Expect a lot of resistance." "Got it. Do we go in fast and hard?" Mitchell stopped for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had dropped to the deeper tone that Trill9 had learned to recognize as her combat tone. "We're going in for the last time. This ends here one way or another. I want that ship taken and their command staff neutralized. No distress signals get out, and no survivors who can tell the rest of the Kresh fleet what happened." "Got it, Captain. We'll take care of it." Mitchell looked back at the tactical display. The Kresh flagship waited in its fortress of asteroids. She looked at the board for a long 30 seconds, moving her eyes over the numbers and figuring out angles, distances, and options. Then her fingers started to move across the screen, drawing a path that made no sense to Trill9 at all. The path she was drawing went right through the densest part of the asteroid field, where the rocks were moving very quickly in relation to each other. It was a death path, a navigational nightmare that no sane pilot would try to follow. His translator made a noise like an alarm. "Captain, that path takes you through a field of debris moving at..." He double-checked the numbers, sure he must have read them wrong. "At 18,000 kilometers per hour. The risk of collision is 97%. This is suicide." Mitchell turned to Peterson. The young helmsman had been at his post for the last 8 hours, piloting the ship as it got closer to Kelver. His hands were a little cramped from holding the controls, and his eyes were red from looking at screens. But he sat up straighter when the captain looked at him. "Can you thread it?" she asked in a simple way. Peterson moved his fingers, cracked his knuckles one at a time, and looked over the route Mitchell had planned. A normal person would have said no. Would have pointed out that what she was asking was impossible. Would have suggested a safer way to do things. But Peterson just smiled, and it was a smile like a predator's that matched his captain's. "Ma'am, my grandmother could do that course." "Then let's show the Kresh how to fly like Grandma." "Yes, Captain. I'm plotting the course now." Trill9 felt like he was about to panic. "Captain Mitchell, please think again. No pilot in the Council fleet could handle that course. The reaction times needed are too fast for most species too." "Most species," Mitchell cut in, "didn't evolve to avoid predators on a death world where everything was faster and stronger than they were. Humans have great hand-eye coordination, observer. We had to, or we would have died out a million years ago." She sat down in her command chair and held on to the armrests. "All hands, this is the captain. Get all stations ready for extreme maneuvering. Medical, get ready for possible casualties from the impact. Engineering, I need maximum power to forward shields and weapons. If you have to, take it from anywhere else." The people on the bridge strapped themselves in. Trill9 held on to his observation chair with all of his limbs, and his heart raced. "Course plotted and locked," Peterson said. His hands hovered over the controls like a musician getting ready to play a hard song. "Captain, are you ready?" "Mr. Peterson, take us in. Show them what a person can do." "Yes, ma'am. Here we go." The Endeavor dove into the field of asteroids. Right away, warning alarms started to sound. Every screen lit up with red proximity alerts. A rock the size of a bus sped by them, missing by less than 20 meters. Then one more, even closer. Peterson's hands moved quickly over the controls. The ship rolled hard to the right to avoid an asteroid the size of a skyscraper that was tumbling through space. Pitched the nose down to avoid a group of smaller rocks. The ship twisted sideways through a gap that looked way too small for it to fit through. Trill9 was horrified to see rocks flying by the viewports in a steady stream. Some of them came so close that he could see the craters and cracks in the old stone and how rough their surfaces were. The ship shook as small pieces of debris hit the shields, making thousands of tiny impacts every second. But Peterson never stopped. He sped up, if anything, making the ship go faster through the deadly maze. His eyes moved quickly between the displays and viewports, and his brain figured out where to go and how to get there faster than the computer could. His hands moved as quickly as a fighter pilot's and as precisely as a surgeon's, making dozens of course corrections every second. A huge asteroid at least 3 times the size of the Endeavour fell right in front of them. There was no way to get around it. There isn't enough time to stop. Peterson turned the ship 90 degrees and flew it through a narrow canyon on the surface of the asteroid, with less than 10 meters of space on either side of the ship. Trill 9 saw the rock face flash by the viewports so quickly that he could have reached out and touched it if the hull plating hadn't been in the way. Then they were through and they came out the other side still whole. How far away is the target? Mitchell asked, her voice steady even though there was a lot of noise around them. Davis said, 5,000 kilometers and closing. His station was showering sparks from the constant hits on the shields, but he didn't pay attention. 3,000. 1,000. We're getting close to weapons range, now. The Endeavour came out of the asteroid field right above the Kresh flagship, coming at them from a direction they hadn't thought to protect. The Kresh had been keeping an eye on the obvious ways to get there. They never thought anyone would be crazy enough to fly through the field of asteroids that were falling. They figured out their mistake too late. Fire everything, Mitchell said. All of the Endeavour's remaining weapons fired at once. They fired everything they had left, including railguns, missiles and laser batteries at point-blank range. The Kresh shields fell apart right away because they had been running for 2 days. The human weapons tore through naked hull plating, ripping through armor that wasn't meant to take this kind of punishment. When systems got too full and ammunition stores blew up, explosions spread across the surface of the Kresh flagship. Target their command section, Mitchell said in a calm voice, as if she were ordering coffee instead of telling people to destroy an enemy warship. I want a hole big enough to get on board. Davis changed where he was aiming. The railguns fired again, and their heavy slugs punched through the Kresh hull in a tight pattern. The armor plate came off. The inside structure crumpled. The atmosphere let out huge clouds of frozen gas. Davis said, breach confirmed. Command section is open to vacuum. There are multiple holes in the hull. Bring us alongside. Boarding teams, you have 30 seconds to get on board. The Endeavour and the Kresh flagship were going at the same speed, and the 2 damaged ships drifted together like tired boxers in a clinch. Magnetic clamps came out of the hull of the human ship and locked onto the Kresh ship with loud, deep thuds that Trill 9 could feel through the deck plates. Wilson and his Marines lined up at the airlock in the armory. They were fully armored for battle, and the plates were painted in adaptive camouflage that changed color to match the surroundings. Every Marine had a rifle, a sidearm, combat knives, and enough ammo to fight off a small army. Wilson looked over his squad one last time to make sure that every seal was tight, every weapon was loaded, and every Marine was ready. These 20 men and women were about to get on an enemy warship that was full of creatures that had evolved to be the best hunters. Creatures with claws that could cut through metal, strength that was greater than that of humans, and a warrior culture that had been fighting wars since humans lived in caves. But the Marines weren't scared. They were focused. Excited even. Wilson told Alpha Squad to take point. Bravo Squad rear guard. Standard breach and clear. Keep an eye on your corners and remember that the Kresh are fast and strong but we're smarter. Use that. Yes, sir, the Marines all said at the same time. Bridge, this is Wilson. The Marines are ready to break in. The speakers made Mitchell's voice clear. Mr. Wilson, you are free to breach. Good luck. Wilson smiled behind his helmet. Thank you, ma'am. We'll get their commander for you. The door to the airlock opened. The Marines pushed off and floated across the space between the ships in a well-practiced way. They got to the hole in the Kresh hull and pulled themselves inside. Their magnetic boots turned on as they stepped onto the deck inside. Then the fighting began. The first Kresh warrior came around a corner at full speed. It was a 3-meter-tall reptilian nightmare with claws out and teeth bared, and its roar would have scared most species to death. It took 2 more steps after Sergeant Rebecca Hayes shot it 3 times in the chest. The rounds that could pierce armor went right through its natural scales and knocked it down. She stepped over the body without stopping, and her rifle was already looking for the next target. There were more Kresh. They were terrible in a beautiful way, perfectly evolved killing machines with reflexes faster than a human's, strength greater than a human's, and natural weapons that didn't need ammo or maintenance. But the Kresh didn't expect what the people had. Exactness. Every shot was aimed, planned, and put exactly where it needed to be. The Kresh used their natural advantages like their speed, strength, and claws, while the humans used their brains. They used cover, worked in pairs, and covered each other's blind spots like animals that had been hunting in packs for millions of years. A Kresh warrior ran at Corporal David Brown with claws outstretched, ready to kill. Brown didn't freak out. He didn't try to match the creature's power. He waited until the perfect moment, then ducked under the swing and stuck his combat knife into the space between the Kresh's shoulder armor plates. The tendon broke. The arm fell limp. Brown's gun came up and shot it. Another Kresh hit a Marine with a claw that went through his armor and made a deep cut across his ribs. Angela Martinez, a young woman who was a Marine, grunted, injected herself with combat drugs from her suit's medical system, and kept fighting. The injury that should have ended the fight was just another problem to deal with later. The Marines moved through the Kresh ship, clearing each room and hallway as they went. The Kresh fought with wild rage, but the humans fought with careful, patient, and unending violence. Approaching command deck, Wilson said, his voice steady even though there was fighting going on in the background. Heavy resistance. They've blocked the way in. Break it, Mitchell said from the bridge of the Endeavour. Wilson's Marines put explosives on the doors to the command deck, stepped back and set them off. There was a shower of molten metal and smoke as the doors blew in. The Marines rushed in with their guns blazing. There was chaos on the Kresh command deck. There was a lot of smoke in the air. The emergency lights went out. The Kresh commander, Kreshik the Render, stood in the middle of it all. He was a scarred veteran who was famous among his people for never losing a battle. He was great. Almost 4 meters tall, with scars from 100 fights, ceremonial blades, and natural claws that had killed many enemies. He yelled a challenge that shook the deck plates. Wilson stepped up to face him. Wilson stepped up to face him. The fight lasted 43 seconds. Kreshik was quicker. More powerful. His claws hit Wilson's armor 3 times hard enough to break it and draw blood. But Wilson's training, his accuracy, and his ability to adapt in the middle of a fight were enough. His 4th hit Kreshik in the throat. The Kresh commander fell to the ground, bleeding but still alive. Wilson's knife stayed at his throat. "Ship is ours, Captain," Wilson said calmly as if he hadn't just fought for his life. Command deck secured. Enemy commander captured. No distress signals sent. Mitchell let out a small, satisfied smile on the bridge of the Endeavour. "Good job, Mr. Wilson. Lock up the ship and get the prisoners ready to leave." She looked at Trill 9 one last time. The Valurian observer sat still in his chair, his compound eyes wide with shock at what he had just seen. Mitchell said in a low voice, "The Kresh won't attack Council ships anymore. Not anyone else who hears about this will either." And on 17 different worlds across the galaxy, Council leaders watched the last moments of the battle and understood. For 30 years people had lived in peace. But peace was always a choice, not something that had to be done. And now the galaxy knew what happened when people made a different choice.